Hello and welcome to this special presentation of Sansad TV on the Defenders. And in this show, we will talk about India's maritime preparedness and the technology and the tactics that are used by our maritime forces, particularly the Indian Navy, to guard India's vast coastline and to provide India the rightful place in the evolving strategic equations in the Indian Ocean region, and of course, the courage, determination, and the capabilities of India's Navy that had excelled, particularly 50 years ago in the 1971 war, and since then has been regarded by many as a military force that has the capabilities of the NATO forces. All this and a lot more on the Indian Navy in the show that we will now be doing on India's maritime capabilities.
Seven 7,517 kilometers long coastline. 12 major ports, 184 smaller ports, and a buffer of 1,197 islands. India's maritime geographical position is both an advantage and a challenge. From Andaman and Nicobar to Lakshadweep and Minicoy, it's our maritime forces which holds the key to bring in and maintain stability and peace in this region of the Indian Ocean. The close proximity of international shipping lanes to India's coasts attracts other powerful countries too to try to dominate and thus create the potential situation of confrontation with India. Add to that, threat of piracy and terrorism. It were the ill-guarded sea routes which were used by the perpetrators of 26/11 attacks in India's commercial capital. Since then, a lot has been put into thought and motion to safeguard our coastline. Silent yet strong. Steady and swift. India's multifold maritime forces, the Coast Guards, the Coastal Police, and finally, the Indian Navy has been safeguarding India's 7,500 long kilometer coastline, along with our strategic territorial and economic interests in the waters of Arabian Sea, Bay of Bengal, and the Indian Ocean. Each of our forces has its task cut out. The Coast Guard protects India's exclusive economic zones from criminals, pirates, smugglers, poachers, human traffickers, and foreign subversions. The Coastal Police, guarding the coastal waters up to 24 nautical miles with its vast surveillance network and high-tech approach, scanning the data from radar chains and sensors installed on the sailing vessels. And the Indian Navy, critical in shaping strategic environment, India's net security provider, leveraging its capabilities as well as naval diplomacy with countries of the region and beyond.
From overt to covert capabilities, the Indian Navy has it all. And guarding India's large coastal areas and the long coastline, which some may argue is as big as India's land borders, or maybe more, is a challenge that the Indian Navy has readily faced and prepares to do even one better than what it has done in the past. More so because the Indian Navy now has strategic engagements, and in the words of one of our distinguished commentators, Commodore Uday Bhaskar, it asks you to understand maritime challenges by looking at India's map from top downwards, because that is how the Navy looks at it. So we have today two veterans and experts who understand the Navy better than perhaps I will ever do. And we have the distinguished Commodore Uday Bhaskar, who needs little introduction because he's always there in the public domain as a commentator in various platforms, former naval officer, and now a well-established name in the strategic affairs circuit. And we have an equally distinguished and a very respected veteran from the Navy, Commodore Ranjit Rai, who is also a military historian, amongst other things. And that's why I'll start with you, sir. In the context of military history, my understanding is the turning point about Indian understanding and our adversaries' understanding about the Indian Navy came with the 71 war, the bombing of Karachi in particular, and operations that certainly facilitated the fall of Dhaka are benchmarks in how professional navies should operate in any case. Could you now make us understand how history has played an important role in the understanding of our threat scenarios for the Navy and how the Indian Navy plans to better that?
Maroof, you have put absolutely the right point. Geography decides history. Our geography and attack from the continental side decided our history. For Pandit Nehru told you, when we were weak at sea, we were colonized. So then we must understand that this century, 21st century, was begun by the 1971 war. 1965 Indian Navy was not allowed to take part. But in 71 war, the Indian Navy had read what Theodore Roosevelt said, that a strong navy is not a provocation for war. It is the best insurance for peace. And therefore, the Indian Navy started building its own capability. So you're right. Today, there is a big responsibility on the Indian Navy, which started in 1971, and 2004, it proved it in the tsunami. Our Indian Navy ships were all over Southeast and Sri Lanka, Maldives, helping Indonesia, where the United States was still discussing how do we go there. Of course, luck was on our side, the NSA, etc. So you're absolutely right that a big responsibility lies, and I would like to just convey the three jobs of the Navy. Be ready for war, nuclear deterrence, which comes with our Ariane and Ariel and ships. The second is constabulary role. With the Coast Guard, we have become quite capable of the constabulary role, and see, there's good order at sea, freedom of navigation, and finally, we have a diplomatic role to show the flag.
No, I completely go with that view, sir, because I have myself been witness to that. Almost 15 years ago, I spent time on INS Virat, and I did see a certificate available with the captain of Virat coming from the American commanders who had done exercises with the Indian Navy and said that our capabilities were as good as the NATO forces or even more. And even international publications have alluded to that. So in my mind, there is no ambiguity on that. What I need clarity on is the 3 points that Commodore Rai talked about: coastal defense, to the diplomatic strategic role, and of course, continuing to strengthen the areas where the Navy needs more equipment to provide India that important second strike deterrent capability, which is what deters an adventurous enemy in the first place.
No, absolutely, Maroof. I think, if you look at the Navy and its essential character, the core character or the DNA of the Navy is, number one, the trans-border element. Historically, navies provide a nation its trans-border military capability, which is legitimate. No other service, whether it's the Army or the Air Force, have a similar kind of DNA. And specific to India, again, as Commodore Rai and you have pointed out, you have to look at India with the peninsula jutting upwards. And if you make it a south to north, you have an idea about the way in which geography has enabled India. And in the 21st century, we know that the global focus is now on what is called as the Indo-Pacific, the continuum of the Indian Ocean and the Pacific Ocean. And we are lucky that if you look at, I say this on every program when I come, that when you think of India, envision India as Kashmir to Kanyakumari and from Andaman Nicobar to Lakshadweep Minicoy. That will give you an idea of the geography of India. And in the 21st century, India's strategic deterrence is best provided by the underwater capability, which, as we have said, is the Arihant. And I think India can take pride that we have designed and built that, albeit with Russian assistance. And this puts India, I would say, in a very favorable position to be able to look after your strategic autonomy. It's a buzzword these days. On your own capabilities. That's the first, I would say, national sovereignty and national identity. And linked to that is the diplomatic part that you were alluding to. And this is in keeping with what Prime Minister Modi has also encouraged and enunciated, which is Sagar, security and growth for all in the region. So from the tsunami of December 2004 to where we are now in 2021, I think the credibility of the Indian tricolour has been burnished repeatedly by the capabilities of the Indian Navy. But the only caveat that I want to introduce at this stage is that, and I've said this to you in the past, Maroof, we are a Cinderella service, meaning that the allocation to the Indian Navy is below 14% of the defense budget. So you have aspirations, you have pedigree, you have professional credibility, but it needs to be sustained with greater infusion. And my sense is that the current leadership, the CDS for instance, General Rawat, he is cognizant of it. The strategic aspirations of India, what India can do. So my sense is that there's lots of work in progress. So we're on track.
We'll come to that, sir, because that is an issue that I think I would like you both to elaborate a bit more on. We are all conscious of that. I mean, it's not just in India, but anywhere in the world. There is always a conflict between your aspiration and ambitions
Absolutely.
and between what your pocket can provide for. But I'll come back to you, Commodore Rai, sir. The Indian Navy, because of the qualities that you talked about and Commodore Bhaskar has just explained also, is seen by many as a security balancer in the region. Call it a pivot, call it the Navy's capability to be present from the coasts of Africa to the Straits of Malacca are given now in terms of what our friends and strategic partners would expect. How do we prepare ourselves in double quick time in the near future to actually be prepared to respond to the multiple challenges that come our way? What are your views?
Very rightly put. How do we prepare ourselves in this 21st maritime century? You know, a nation which gives full regard to its maritime power is called a theocratic state. Unfortunately, North India, half the population has not even seen the sea. Therefore, I would like to bring about China, which had no maritime geography. Therefore, they went for the South China Seas, which we are opposing now, but they went. Now they want to come with Pakistan to the Indian Ocean. So India has to become a theocratic state. The whole country has to probably tighten a bit of its belt in all ministries of the thing and provide a little more money, which you've talked about, tighten a belt, because that is the insurance for India. That is one aspect. The second, there's nothing to worry. We have shipbuilding in India. We are building a new port south of Visakhapatnam. Karwar is coming up. Because unless you have shore support, the ships cannot be that operational. We had only Vizag and Mumbai. But now we are expanding. We have got friends in the Indian Ocean, which you've talked about. We are the net security provider. So I think the template is ready. But once again, money makes the mayor talk. And Uday Bhaskar has written on this. With 13.6%, the Chief of Naval Staff, and Karambir Singh has said, he tries to do his very best. Luckily, we are building in India, so we are giving rupees. He has
Sir, I concede that point, but in defense of the other two services also, it's an argument I've often heard whenever I've interacted with the high officials from South Block, that every service chief is championing his case, and rightly so, because he has to go back and show deliverables. But in the case of the army, it's very manpower intensive, and any amount of technology can't ensure that your huge borders can be guarded with just radar systems, because we've seen that in the case of Kashmir. But coming back to your point about borders and coastline, you were talking about the Prime Minister's initiative of Sagar. Now, help us understand, is Sagar primarily about developing of our entire coastal belt, or is Sagar basically a strategic military concept which has been given an add-on economic development angle?
My reading is that when Prime Minister Modi unveiled or spoke about Sagar, it was in 2015. He had done a 3-island tour. And I think the aspiration again was that India would be able to enable the security and growth for all in the region. That's how it was phrased, Sagar.
Even the Sri Lankans were expecting India to come in and
be
help
on
with
board
their growth
exactly.
with Sagar.
So I'm saying on that Sagar, this is the vision of the Prime Minister, which is that India would be the equivalent of a net security provider across the board, meaning from matters military, which is what are the smaller states concerned about? Piracy, the kind of overfishing that takes place, and the threat to good order at sea. These are the kind of things that small countries are not able to do on their own. So there is one part which is military related. The other is the economic dimension, which we now bring under the umbrella of the blue economy. So I think, I'm trying to conjecture or sort of interpret the Prime Minister, it was for the Indian Ocean region. But because Maroof, India had gone through the terror attack in Mumbai in 2008, 26/11, I think there's a deep awareness that there are vulnerabilities as far as India's coastal security is concerned. Therefore, I think today, if you look at the government of India's effort, they are trying to enhance both the capability of the coastal states as also the kind of capabilities at the center. So we are talking now about a nodal maritime security advisor for the country, who in turn would be able to take this holistic picture. And if we have adequate, I would say, funding support, there is an enormous amount that India can do in the strategic and security domain. There's an enormous amount that India can do in the economic and trade domain. And finally, in the demography, which is the human security indicators for the whole region. So if India can get its blueprint right, I think it will burnish again its credibility to be the security, I would say, enabler. I don't want to say provider because our capabilities are modest. But if we can take the whole Indian Ocean littoral, and this is where I think the latest report of the IPCC on climate is so, I would say, important as a kind of amber light about where the oceans of the world are going, how that can endanger human security definitely in the Indian Ocean, and why I think countries like India that have capability should really be, I think, bringing these, I would say, issues onto the regional table, if not the global table. If you remember at the UNSC, the Prime Minister spoke about maritime security.
Absolutely. Very interesting. I'll go back, Commodore Rai, to a point that Commodore Bhaskar raised, is about capabilities. And obviously, we're all aware that our capabilities are limited, but it's a lot more than almost most countries in Asia could hope to have. China, of course, is expanding rapidly, but China has global ambitions. I don't think we've as yet looked at getting there. In terms of capabilities, there is this debate between what do you really need. I mean, do you need aircraft carriers and more of that with all the add-ons that go with it? It's just not one vessel that you buy, but it's a monarch of the high seas. So how do you equip it suitably to make the point? Vis-a-vis, how do you use your island facilities, which are around India, Andaman's, Lakshadweep, and use them in a way as also aircraft carriers for placing aircrafts there to launch onto adversaries, since the naval chief has referred to the importance of air power to beef up sea operations. And where do submarines fit into this entire equation? So if you can just give us an idea of all that.
Maroof, submarines are required for war. In peacetime, they only practice or they use for intelligence. Rich nations can afford aircraft carriers because they enhance your expeditionary force. We had to go to Sri Lanka. We've done evacuations from all over. So I think India will have to, in the long term, look at aircraft carriers because we are destined to grow. I think Prime Minister Modi has got his thing clear when he spoke to jointness. I'll be a devil's advocate. If the Navy can produce a strategy and have a doctrine, and if the Air Force has one army, why can't they be three joint? Because if you have air power, as you said, and the islands are made actually floating aircraft carriers, it's a cheap method to say. But then the Navy will have to walk back and say, all right, Air Force, come in, or I'll operate my aircraft. If the Army can come in with LPDs, for which an RFI has given, then all this comes in with a tri-service which Prime Minister actually put on the shoulders of the Chief of Defence Staff, jointness.
I support that thesis, sir. And where I think Commodore Bhaskar has some reservations, and you had written once about before going in for a maritime command, you need to look at it more holistically in terms of what is really required. But and there, that we are entering into a separate debate. But Commodore Bhaskar, sir, the Navy is really at the forefront of indigenization, the technologies that it produces, and it has produced even a top-notch nuclear-capable submarine.
Sure.
It's now in the process of coming up with INS Vishal, possibly the third aircraft carrier. So it's got too many credits compared to the other services. What is it that the Navy has done right to get all this in place as against the other services who are nowhere near the Navy in terms of indigenization and enhancing your own capabilities? Because that's the way eventually we all have to go.
The short answer, Maroof, is I think what the Navy got right in the early years was that we invested in human resource, particularly in terms of ship design, naval architecture. That, I think, is one of the areas which has given the Navy rich dividends, because we were able to have people in uniform who had trained as naval architects, and concurrently we were able to keep naval officers in the public sector shipbuilding yards. So Mazagon Docks is a classic example where when India had acquired the capability based on its own naval architectural, I would say, HR, we embarked on the Leanders, which were built in Mumbai, and from there we scaled up and moved from the Leander to the Godavari class, and finally to what we now are very proud of, which is the Delhi and beyond the Delhi. All of this based on ship design capabilities, naval architecture that the Navy had in uniform. I think that was a very important kind of, I would say, element of where we invested, and of course the whole ecosystem of the country. If we were able to do the nuclear submarine, the Arihant, the Navy was able to partner with other parts of the government, the DAE, the academia, as also I would say public sector units and the private sector. So I think all boats in a way were able to rise together. So I think that's been one of the areas of strength. But I do want to add this, don't say I'm the bad fairy at the good party. But one area that India as a country needs to invest in, if we compare our productivity, say for instance in shipyards, it is less than 50% of what, for instance, the Chinese do or the South Koreans do or the Japanese do. So I think we need to benchmark ourselves with the best in the world, and hopefully with the current focus on Atmanirbhar, maybe we'll get there.
Yeah, that is the hope at every level, because certainly our indigenous infrastructure, needs to be stepped up quite dramatically. And I think there is a late but welcome recognition of the fact that we need to do that. The Navy is, you might like to repeat your term, Cinderella service, but I'm sure in the next conflict, it will not be left looking for some boats, as Cinderella said. I think I'm confident that the Indian Navy is world class and it is only getting better. Thank you very much, sir, for your wisdom, and thank you for watching. Until our next episode, goodbye.